This is Faith Still Seeking, a program about Christian theology. I believe, but I want to know more. I'm not a minister. I'm not a PhD. I'm just a layman, and I'm doing theology. Yeah, I definitely don't have it all figured out, but it's never stopped me from trying.
What the fuck am I doing here? Guess I'm looking for a place to be. I don't know what the hell to believe. I wish I had the answers up my sleeve.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of Faith Still Seeking. I'm your host, Kelly Wilson, and it's the end of the world, or at least it feels like it. If you watch the news, if you read anything online, and if you're a person who ever grew up thinking about the biblical end of the world, it's not difficult to see what appear to be signs of it everywhere. And there's the conflict in the Middle East. There's things that are happening politically in our own country. There's things that are happening environmentally. There's things that are happening financially that all seem to be adding up to this culmination of the end of the world. However, the world has always seemed to be ending for people in many different ages of the church. So today we're going to talk with a scholar and expert who's going to talk with us about how to navigate some of this information and how to look at it in light of Scripture and what the Bible actually says about these things. Today we're talking with Keith Giles, who's an author and a publisher and a podcaster and former pastor. He's been interviewed on CNN with Anderson Cooper. He's been on USA Today, Fox News, BuzzFeed. He's on John Fugelsang's Sirius XM radio show, Tell Me Everything. He has his own podcast, The God Squad, and he's also co-host of the Heretic Happy Hour podcast. He has his own solo podcast, Second Cup with Keith. His books, he's written the 7-part Jesus series, which is based on deconstruction and Christian faith. One of the books in that series that I hope we get to talk about today is called Jesus Unexpected. You can find this on Amazon and other booksellers. And this book, Jesus Unexpected, the subtitle is Ending the End Times to Become the Second Coming. The description, the second coming of Christ has been coming soon ever since 1850, when John Nelson Darby popularized his brand of end times dispensational rapture theology. Many Christians today are unaware that the version of biblical prophecy that they've been taught is not what the church believed for the first 1800 years. It's time to leave behind the end times and discover an astounding truth. Christ has already returned, and our participation is essential to make all things new. So I'm very much looking forward to those ideas and contrasting them with some of the things that I learned earlier in life. Keith is also one of the authors of a new book that just came out called The Unchristian Truth About White Christian Nationalism. And he's one of the writers and the editor. Has a foreword by Lisa Sharon Harper. And the description is, this book amplifies the voices of those most at risk from the white Christian nationalist agenda, as well as those who stand as firm allies to the marginalized communities under attack. So I'm very excited to talk with Keith today and get to the bottom of this end of the world stuff. So hi, Keith. Welcome. Glad to have you here today.
Yeah. Kelly, thank you so much for having me back. It's always a joy to talk with you.
Here as we enter the end times, or so
yes.
I hear.
Here at the end of the world. It does feel that way sometimes, I'll be honest.
Yes, yes. And it's felt that way. You know, I grew up in the late 70s, 80s under the, Hal Lindsey and the late, great planet Earth and the Cold War and all the nuclear weapons were pointed to us. And people were like, is Russia the great country from the north that invades Israel? Yeah.
Is Gorbachev, well, first I guess it was Brezhnev, and then is it Gorbachev? And because Gorbachev had that mark on his head.
Yeah, that's right. He had that birthmark
in the 80s.
That people
maybe
were
that was actually covering up the mark of the beast, right?
Right.
I worked, when I was going to college in the 80s, I worked at the Baptist bookstore, and we had an entire section during that time of all of these, Blood and Oil was one of the books. There was just this endless, number of books about speculating on the end times and who was the beast and who was the Antichrist. And then, of course, The Thief in the Night was horrible. Thief in the Night.
Those movies.
VHS.
Those were my horror movies when I was growing up. Yeah,
they were perfectly designed to terrify children in youth groups. And they did a wonderful job of that.
Yeah, and they had like the hailstones the size of Volkswagens coming down. Because there was a whole, they did a trilogy.
There's probably four of them, I think, actually.
Oh, are there? Yeah.
Yeah, they're Days of Thunder, if I can remember all of them. Thief in the Night, Days of Thunder. I can't remember all of them. What's funny is, though, you can go to YouTube, because I showed them to my kids when they were younger, and they just laughed because they're so bad. The production quality is so bad. One of my favorite scenes in one of those, it's not The Thief in the Night, because this doesn't happen until later on in Revelation, right? And they have no budget. So they have no special effects budgets whatsoever, right? So, there's the part in Revelation, which as a kid always scared the crap out of me, which is these creatures that have the face of a woman and the body of a horse, almost like a centaur, but it's got the tail of a scorpion. And it can sting you, and you won't. But it's super painful, but you will not be able to die. And so the way they show that in this film series is there's a mom, and she's in the kitchen, and she's talking to her kid, and she opens the door, I think, to let the cat in or something. And while she's talking, she's not looking at what's the door behind her. She's looking at the kids. And while she's looking at the kid and talking, slowly over her shoulder. And you can almost see the fishing line, right? Someone is like they've taken it looks like they've taken like a bedspread and stuffed it with balloons or maybe cotton or something and just made these little, so it almost is shaped like a scorpion tail. It's got segments.
Like a plush.
Yeah, and it's got like a stinger on it, but it's like a coat hanger. And it's kind of flopping in over her shoulder.
Oh, wow.
And it's supposed to like come in and kind of like sting her, but it's like, oh my gosh, I laughed so hard on that part because it was like you took the thing that was the thing that gave me nightmares. It was the most terrifying thing, and you just made it the dumbest thing I could possibly imagine. But nevertheless, yes, they did their job, which was to terrify a lot of people, a lot of kids into coming forward, at the end in the altar call.
It's funny that you mentioned the scorpions. It brought to mind another book that I picked up as a kid that I should not have picked up as a kid was Helter Skelter about like Charles Manson and the Manson family. And he had his own reading of Revelation and he read himself into it.
Oh, man.
But he thought that the scorpions they had like breastplates and they had hair of women were the Beatles. And that the tails were like the cords from their electric guitars.
Going to they do kind of look like scorpion tails. I mean,
and he conflated that with stuff that he was picking up from the White Album.
Oh, yeah.
So, like Revelation 9 and Revolution 9. And it was, I guess it just goes to show that the book of Revelation is rich enough in imagery that if you're in the right state of mind, you can find a lot of stuff in there that you want to find. Yeah.
And look, that's the thing. That's the problem with this whole thing. And you and I know this. I think we talked about this before too. That whole end times thing, right? All of that rapture theory stuff, which again seems to never go away. What helps to know is that when you find out that, first of all, that no one believed this until around 1830, right? This guy, John Nelson Darby, is this British guy that literally fell off his horse, hit his head on a rock, then went to church, and there was a young girl who had a fever, and she was out of her mind, and she was saying all kinds of crazy stuff. And something she said, he started then he went to the Bible to look for ways to take the things that this feverish girl was saying and these ideas he had, or this vision he had, or whatever, when he hit his head on the rock, to sort of invent a story. And then once he had the story, by the way, this is the way it still works today. They first have to tell you the story, right? There's going to be this guy, and he's a world leader, and he's very charismatic, and everyone, even Christians, love him, and they think he's great. And he's going to make this friendship and this treaty with Israel, but after 3.5 years, he's going to break the treaty. And at some point, the temple's going to have to be rebuilt in Jerusalem, and the daily sacrifice has to start again, because then he has to end the daily sacrifice, and then he has to set himself up in the temple as God, and then he has to force everyone to take this mark and worship him, or he'll put them to death, and then that's the tribulation. So they have to tell you this whole story. And then once you've heard the story and you believe the story, then they will go. This is what Darby did. He had the story, and then he went into the Bible to like, okay, well, this verse here proves that part. And then over here in this other book, this other verse here, that proves this part. And it's all this disconnected, disjointed stuff. And so you can make it say you can make it fit your story, right? In the same way that Charles Manson could decide it was the Beatles and the White Album and the guitar chords, and then go and find verses and say, see, there it is.
Right.
Yeah, and that's the problem with it, right? And then the fact that because Schofield bought into these theories from John Nelson Darby and actually published them in his Bible, published in America, it literally became part of the Bible. So nowadays, most American Christians have no idea that this isn't something that people don't believe in Christians don't believe in other parts of the world unless we've imported it to them. Right.
Or missionary churches and so, yeah.
Yeah. And that Christians didn't believe this until 1830, right? This is not the way early Christians thought about when they read the Bible. They weren't telling that story to each other. So, yeah. And, then it's an industry. This is the thing. Like, Hal Lindsey made literally tens of millions of dollars selling all these books, right? And then, as far as I know, he was probably one of the first to really cash in on it. But once he did, other people did as well, right?
The whole
Jack Van Impe and Tim LaHaye, and so many people.
Right.
Even what's his name? Hagee, Pastor Hagee, in San Antonio. He had a book about the blood moons and all this stuff. Again, it's a money-making industry. You make millions of dollars. Even if, and here's what's funny, what all of those guys have in common is that every one of them was dead wrong. But any one of them that are still alive, Hal Lindsey's not alive anymore. I think Tim LaHaye died too. But anyway, if somehow any of these guys could publish a book today, they would still sell 1 million copies. You know what I mean?
Right. They just keep moving the goalpost, don't they?
Moving the goalpost. And no one seems to care that, well, you were wrong. You said before it was this. You said before it was like Hal Lindsey literally says, I think it's in Late Great Planet Earth, that he didn't think that humanity would live beyond the 1980s. That by the 1990s, Jesus would have returned. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That's, I had to admit that to my child not long ago. We were talking about like future plans. She's a teenager. She's 16. And I was like, I actually was a little surprised that I turned 30, even though I had already kind of deconstructed and learned a lot about Bible history. And like, I'd never really envisioned myself being on earth because I was so steeped in that culture as a kid. And people that I went to church with, people in my family talk about, as long as I'm here, like it's until I die or Jesus comes back. Yeah. And there's always that expectation, like it could be today.
That's right.
Which I think Jesus himself had that expectation, if I remember correctly. Like he was like, nobody here is going to die before you see me coming back.
Well, but it's understanding what does he mean by that. Again, this is part of the problem, really the challenge to sort of unravel that story in the minds of American Christians, because they think that they understand what's being said when Jesus talks about these things. Oh, that means this and this means that. And like, well, but it doesn't mean that. And so how can I show you that it doesn't mean that when you're convinced it does say that? It's pointing to this, right? But like you go talking to the thing about like the existential dread and fear. I remember in 1988, I went to a friend's house and his brother was doing a Bible study based on a book study. Really wasn't a Bible study. It was a book study based on the book 88 Reasons Why Jesus Will Return in 1988. And I remember driving home that night thinking, like you were saying, I'll never get married. I'll never have kids. Like, wow, this really sucks. Like, okay, Jesus, I'm glad you're coming back, but damn, my life. I don't get to have a life. You know what I mean? this is it. And then, of course, 88 comes and goes. And then the same guy publishes a new book called 89 Reasons Why Jesus Will Return in 1989. And then that was probably the first that I started to think, wait a minute. I mean, 88 reasons, that's a lot of reasons. And it seems like they were all wrong. Like you were wrong about all of those reasons. Seems like 88 reasons why you're wrong about how to read the book of Revelation and how to read biblical prophecy. That's really the lesson we should take from it, right? That what they've proven, people writing this stuff and talking about this stuff, what they've proven is that they really don't know how to read and how to understand Revelation or Daniel or Matthew 24 or any of those passages, right? Because they've been wrong about all of those things since 1830, really. That's the other thing, too, is to notice, like, all these people setting dates. And again, this happens all the time, right? So I'm like, oh, Jesus is supposed to come back in August, whatever. And I've lived through a bunch of those, raptures that came and went and never happened. That phenomenon, again, only started after 1830. You don't have examples in church history of Christians setting dates for the return of Jesus. Because, again, no one thought this way. So, yeah, I wrote a book about this, Jesus Unexpected. One, kind of pointing out Darby. I do a little bit of background on him personally. He had a connection with Aleister Crowley, which is weird.
Oh, that is weird.
Yeah, and then how his kind of story kind of became, the story he made up became, quote unquote, biblical theology for so many Christians. And then I go through and kind of debunk it. And then I have in the book I talk about what I think is actually a better way of thinking about this second coming of Jesus, right? A better way of thinking of it than what Darby has given us and what we've all accepted now is the scenario that has to play out, right?
Right. Well, it is really clever what he did. If you look at it, you say, wow, one passage of scripture says Jesus is coming as a thief in the night, and another one says he's coming on clouds of glory. So if everything has to be literal and true and nothing can be wrong, then he must be coming back twice. It's like the sneaky way and the
first time it's a thief and the second time.
Yeah. And never mind the good shepherd stuff. He's fine with leaving people behind this time.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah. Those evil people again, but it gets into again, that sort of, sadly, that sort of evangelical Christian kind of like revenge fantasy, because that's kind of what it becomes. And it's interesting too, a lot of it hinges on misreadings of Matthew 24, like the Olivet Discourse. So because parts of that, they'll take it and say, oh, he's talking about eternal conscious torment. Because he's talking about where the worm does not die and the fire is not quenched and the flames of their torment rise forever and ever, right? Oh, see, he's talking about hell.
Right.
But then in the same discourse, he'll talk about, two people will be standing there and one will be taken, the other will be left. And like, okay, that's about the rapture and the second coming of Jesus. But the end result of both of those narratives is that all those people I don't like are going to get it in the end, right? They're going to suffer. They're going to, and I'm going to be the one either floating in the sky up to heaven while Earth is being turned into a fiery pit of destruction. and or I'm at the judgment seat and I'm in the white robe and I'm getting the crown to lay at Jesus' feet, and all these people I don't like, they're being judged and thrown into the pit of hell for eternity. So, but both of those are misunderstandings of kind of some of the same passages, reading them too literally and not understanding like apocalyptic hyperbole, which is something that is all through the Old Testament. And Jesus is just sort of borrowing those ideas and that language in Matthew 24, and in the Olivet Discourse.
So what do you think Jesus really is talking about here?
Yeah. So I think all of those things in Matthew 24, again, are, and I do this in the book, and it's funny because I kind of do the same thing in both this book about the end times, and I treat the same kind of passages in the book Jesus Undefeated about hell, but depending on whether it gets applied to hell or gets applied to the end times.
I do want to put a plug in there for people to check out that whole Jesus on series. Keith does a great job of stripping away a lot of the kind of modern theological understandings to get down to the real text and what's going on. So
yeah, thank you. So like what I think is really happening there, again, it helps, and I do this in the book, it helps to first go back and look at Old Testament passages where both minor and major prophets of the Old Covenant, and Hebrew prophets, Jewish prophets, where they use the language originally, right? So, like I said, Jesus is borrowing their language to talk about something slightly different, but not so different. That's the point. So, like when they talk about, like when some of these prophets talk about, again, where the fire is not quenched and the worm does not die, and the smoke of the torment rises forever and ever, and the sky is dark, and the sun does not give its light, and the stars fall from the sky, and the moon turns to blood. All of that imagery that we associate with end times imagery. When Isaiah and Jeremiah and Malachi and Ezekiel and all these guys, when they're using that language, in every single case, they're using apocalyptic hyperbole. Yes, they're using language talking like the sun doesn't give its light and the moon turns blood and the stars fall from the sky. But when they're saying that, they're talking about the destruction of Jerusalem, or the destruction of Egypt, or the destruction of the Midianites, or something like that, right? They are prophets speaking to these nations and giving them a warning, right? And that's why they're using this kind of very scary end of the world language, right? Planet Earth will explode and time will stop and the world will end if you don't repent and turn back. And, so it's that level of warning, but it doesn't literally mean, I mean, we know, because we now know what stars are. Stars cannot fall to the earth. That would not, it's impossible, right?
Right. They're not just like hung on a dome that's above
yeah, they're not like little fireflies up in the sky. That's right.
Feels like I'm still faking it. Maybe that's okay. Who the hell am I supposed to be? Oh.
So again, they're using this language. Really, kind of what they're kind of saying is to these nations, Egypt and Jerusalem and Media and all these other kind of places where they're used, when that language is used. What they're saying to those people is, when they say the world is going to end, they don't mean the entire planet is going to go away. They mean your world is going to go away. Life as you know it will come to an end, right? Your existence will stop, right? And so to you, it's going to feel like the end of the world because you're going to basically be dead, and everything you know will be destroyed, and everyone you love will be dead. So it's a real warning about real destruction and danger that they're facing if they don't turn around and change what they're doing. Like, this is the road you're on. The bridge is out. Stop. Turn around. Because if you keep going this way, you're going to go off the bridge and into the pit below. That's all they're trying to communicate. but they're using this kind of scary language to emphasize it. So Jesus in Matthew 24, you have to back it up. It's all come back to me now. I haven't talked about this in a long time. You have to back it up. So at the beginning of Matthew 24, how this whole dialogue begins in the first place. Jesus and some of the disciples are coming out of the temple or walking by the temple. And the disciples point to the temple and say, Jesus, look at this temple. Isn't this thing amazing? You know, it's this one of the wonders of the world. It's just phenomenal and fantastic and amazing. And isn't this temple great? And then Jesus says to them, a day is coming soon when not one stone of this temple will remain upon the other, but all of it will be cast down and destroyed. And they're like, what? Well, wait a minute. So then they sit down and they're like, tell us when. When is this going to happen? Right? And then he starts what we call the Olivet Discourse. And then he starts using this language, right? About the sun will be darkened and the moon will not give its light and the stars will fall from the sky. Now, they, as good Jewish young men, would go, oh, this reminds me of Jeremiah when he was warning the Israeli, the Jewish people about their disobedience. And if they didn't change their path and change their hearts, that they were, and they also remember, and that happened, right? Because they didn't repent, and then they did get invaded by the Philistines or, Assyria or some other country, and they were taken captive. And so as Jesus is using this language about the temple in Jerusalem, he's warning his people, his disciples, about destruction that's going to happen in Jerusalem. The kind of destruction that will end with the destruction of that temple. That's what started the whole conversation. So that's what he's talking about. He's not talking about the end of the world. He's not talking about literally the end of, in fact, here's the funny thing. He never says he's talking about the end of the world. He says it's the end of the age. And so the end of the age doesn't mean the end of the world. Like life still goes on for other people, but the people that lived in that age, again, life for them will end. And their way of life will end.
And,
so
when the temple was destroyed, it really was kind of a new age.
Oh, totally.
We don't
yes.
sacrifice in the temple anymore. There's the diaspora.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. Yeah. So if you think about it like that, right, what is it that the disciples are marveling at and are kind of like excited about? Well, the temple, right, and this temple system. And so there's this beautiful building. There's a beautiful temple. There's a sacrificial system, which is, the main thing that they as followers, Jewish followers, need to participate in order to for their worship, right, of God. And they have a priesthood, right? There's this lineage of the tribes that are priests and all of that. I mean, that all their religion, all their, their history, everything is wrapped up in the priesthood, the temple, and the sacrifice, the daily sacrifice. And then Jesus basically tells them, hey, if things don't change, all of that is going to end. And they couldn't imagine that. Like, what? That's going to go away. That'll end, and it'll end like pretty much forever. Like it's not going to come back. And so that is what happens, right? And so when he says these things will have, some of you standing here will not taste death until these things happen. What are these things? The things, the events he's describing that lead to the destruction of the temple. And we know that he said this around AD 40 or so. And then AD 70, like 30 years later, that's exactly what happened. I think what makes it difficult also for people, or makes it even easier for dispensationalism to kind of become popular and take root in people's imagination, is that we don't have in the Bible the fulfillment story. You know what I mean? Like you would have to you'd have to get a copy of Josephus, which I have, by the way, and it's amazing. If you will read Josephus, who's a first century Jew, he's a historian. He describes in incredible detail the destruction of the temple in AD 70. And if just that part of Josephus was printed in your Bible right after Matthew 24, or the next book, like Matthew, Josephus, destruction of the temple, and then Mark and Luke and John. Right. Then it would be like, oh, okay, yeah. Okay, Jesus said these things were going to happen, and well, look at that. Man, wow, did it ever? It really did happen. Then it would be like, oh, well, then no one could come along and say, hey, all those things that Jesus said were going to happen that already did happen like 2,000 years ago, now they're going to happen again. Well, why would you say that? Like all of a sudden now, why are you acting like this has to happen again? It already did happen, right?
Right.
That's why a lot of times dispensationalists will talk about double fulfillment, because when someone will bring up, well, actually that prophecy you're pointing to, that was fulfilled already. And you can point to it, right? And then they'll say, well, but it's, but there's dual fulfillment. So it's going to happen again. Like, okay, when do these things ever get fulfilled? What does fulfillment mean to you?
Right.
Is it really fulfilled if it just keeps happening? It needs to keep happening because it should have already happened once. And then that's what I was talking about. And it happened, the end. There is no the end. It just keeps, again, like moving the goalpost out now.
That was one of the things that when I first started dismantling my view of the end times was thinking about it in terms of likelihoods.
Yeah.
Because I had been taught that there's a hangar or a Quonset hut somewhere in Jerusalem full of construction materials. Like they are waiting.
They're just waiting
for the moment that somehow the Dome of the Rock comes down and they're going to go out there and they're going to put that temple back up.
Yes. They have the red heifer ashes and all that stuff. I've seen all those stories. Yeah.
And I'm just thinking, like, what's the likelihood that they're going to rebuild a temple, reestablish a sacrificial system, that Rome is going to somehow come back into power? Because, I read the Seven Hills. It's like, that's a Roman Empire, right?
Yeah.
And then when people are like, no, that Roman Empire is symbolic for this one world government.
Yeah, of course.
Like, well, which parts are literal and which parts are symbolic? They're awful fast and loose with that. But what's the likelihood that those things will come back versus the likelihood that the author was talking about those things happening now?
Yeah, happening in their day.
In their time, I mean, yeah.
That's right. No, I think that's exactly right. Yeah, and then, recognizing that, just like you said, like they're talking about things that are going to happen. And again, they use this language all the time. Jesus says this, things that will happen soon and quickly, and meaning immediately in their time, in their lifetime. Not over 2,000 years later, and we're still waiting for these things to be fulfilled. Like, what? Like, it's nonsense. I think the thing about the temple as well, this is the thing I don't really get either. Like, a lot of Christians that are dispensationalists, and this was, I think, one of the misunderstandings that Darby had and perpetuated, right, was like, if you frankly just read the book of Ephesians. There's a guy named Ken Gentry that wrote a series of articles. I don't even know if you can still find him on the internet anymore. But he basically, just using the book of Ephesians, dismantled all of dispensationalist arguments.
Oh, wow.
But because they want to say that that the Jewish people are still separate and God has a separate plan for the Jewish people that's independent of God's plan for the rest of the planet. And so non-Jews are going to be saved through Jesus and his blood and sacrifice blood. But Jews are going to be saved by fulfilling the law and fulfilling their calling, as chosen people or whatever. And it's like, what are you talking about? Paul in Ephesians talks all about how the two have become one. God has grafted them in, right? Or grafted us in, and we're all one. So he just goes through, and it's genius. I reference some of that in my book because it's so well done. And it just refutes one by one all these ideas. And the thing about, again, like, if modern day evangelical Christians or any Christian still believes that God wants to rebuild, has to rebuild the temple and reinstitute an animal sacrifice, and that why would any Christian want to do that? Like, you, as a Christian, you should look at that and as from your Christian faith, you should say, like, that's almost an abomination. Because again, what Paul says is that he says, and I think Hebrews says this as well, that this idea of the priesthood and the temple and the sacrifice were all fulfilled in Christ, right? Those were metaphors. Talk about metaphors that are being fulfilled, right? That whole temple system, all of that was a metaphor, a picture for the person of Christ, the Messiah, because Jesus is the high priest. He's the last priest. He's the final high priest. He performs the final thing in the temple of what? His body is the temple. Jesus says, destroy this temple in 3 days and I'll rise it again. And then after his resurrection, the disciples remembered he was speaking of the temple of his body. So the temple was actually pointing to the body of Jesus. Jesus is the priest. He is the high priest, right? That's what it says in Hebrews. And he performs the ultimate, the final sacrifice, again, of himself. So Jesus is the temple, Jesus is the priest, and Jesus is the sacrifice. And that is the absolute final fulfillment of all of those things. There is no need anymore to go back and rebuild the shadow and the metaphor. We already have seen the real thing, and that has fulfilled everything. All of those promises, right?
Right.
So, and then even beyond that, what Paul also says is, Paul makes that point, and then Paul says, and by the way, now, because Jesus fulfilled all three of those things, now guess who is the temple of God? You are. We are.
Wow.
Right? We are the temple of God. And guess who the priests are now? We are, because we're all priests in God's kingdom. Every one of us is a priest.
Oh, yeah.
We are all priests, right? And now, who is offering the daily sacrifice now? We are. Romans 12. We are the living, daily sacrifice to God. So because Jesus has fulfilled those three pictures, temple, priest, and sacrifice, now it's been exponentially multiplied out to us. We are the temple. If you want to find the temple of God, look in the mirror.
Right, we're the body of Christ, right?
Yeah, if you're looking for the priest of God, look in the mirror, right? If you're looking for the daily sacrifice, it's you. It's your living life surrendered to Christ. So, again, I think if that is way more exciting and way more, amazing than waiting for some architect in some construction crew in Jerusalem to start. Okay, guys, fire it up. Let's start building this temple again.
Well, doesn't Jesus say, "I desire mercy, not sacrifice"?
That's right. That is exactly right. A very scandalous thing. Exactly.
Yeah.
Mercy, not sacrifice. And God says that all through, actually, right? Even the Old Covenant scriptures, like I think in Isaiah, God says, I never asked you guys to offer these sacrifices. That was your idea, right?
Right. You needed a symbol.
Yes. Yeah.
It's my picture of the rapture has definitely changed a lot, because I know as a kid I thought it was going to be like the parable of the rich man and Lazarus, where Lazarus is like, oh please, or the rich man is like, please, it's so hot, I need a glass of water.
Yeah.
And Lazarus is up there with Abraham looking down like, nah, don't think so. And the thought of good Christian people, some of whom I've known, passed on, looking down and reveling in the torment of people in the tribulation, getting theirs or whatever. So that only, depending on who you talk to, like only 144,000 will make it through, or, but it just seems unchristian. Like I would almost rather be left behind to help people out. Like somebody who at least knows something about what's going on should be able to stay behind and teach them. No,
I totally agree. That is the heart of Jesus, right? Jesus, isn't that the whole thing Jesus talks about, right? He leaves the 99 to go and find the one.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So if anyone's left out, Jesus is going to be with that one. Jesus is going to seek out that person and be with that person. And we should want to as well. We should be like, oh no, yeah, guys, go ahead. I'm gonna go back here and be with this person that's totally abandoned.
Right. Yeah. I'm gonna hang out with the prostitutes. I'm gonna hang out with the tax collectors. I'm gonna, that.
Yeah,
it just seems antithetical.
Yeah. Well, no. Here's what's fascinating as well is, like, honestly, that is the picture in Revelation. Like, Revelation ends with this idea, right, of heaven now comes down. The city of God, right, comes down onto earth, and Jesus is sitting in the throne. And outside of the city gates are all the nations, all the sinners, all the prostitutes and tax collectors, and all the nations who, in the story of Revelations, have just gone to war with God, right? And so they're the outcast. So here's this city, and Jesus is in the center, and then it makes this amazing point. I love that this is actually how Revelation ends, and no one. These people that love to talk about this dispensational stuff never talk about this. So in the city, right, they make a point to say that there's this river, this living water flowing from the throne of Jesus, who's sitting in the center, right, in the New Jerusalem, and which is on earth, right, and then on either side of the river are these trees whose leaves are for the healing of the nations. And who are the nations? The people that just went to war with God and lost and are the outcast on the outside of the city. And then it also mentions this other detail. The second thing it mentions is that the gates of the city, it describes these amazing gates, right? That's where we get the idea of the pearly gates and all these kind of things, right? But what it says about those gates is they are never shut. Never.
Wow.
Those gates are never closed. And then the third thing it says, after it tells us all those two details, is then we hear this cry coming from within the city. Come, all you who are thirsty, and drink freely from the river of life. All right, and then when you're there drinking this river of life flowing from the throne of Christ, you'll be shaded by these trees whose leaves exist only to heal you. Like it's such an open invitation of mercy and grace to these. It's not looking down on them who are suffering and gloating. No, Christ is in the midst of those people, and the doors are open and everything is free, and come on in and get healed and restored and redeemed, right? That's how it ends. That's how the story ends. I wish that would be the way we would tell the story, right?
Wow.
Be honest about how it really ends. Because it ends with this call of, even so, Lord, come. But it's said that even so, Lord, come is in the context of so that picture we just had will happen. That the Christ will come on earth, the gates will be opened, the nations will be healed and welcomed in and given freely this river of life. And that everyone receives this blessing, right? This mercy is for everyone. Yeah.
Wow. That is such a different story than this kind of binary, you're in, you're out. And it's amazing that, and I only realized this a few years ago reading N.T. Wright, that this all happens on earth. Yeah. That there is not a point where we get flown off.
Yes, we're in heaven.
Yeah, flown off to heaven and live in heaven comes down. So even this idea of, I saw a speech a couple years back at the CPAC, the conservative organization, and it was Sean Hannity was on stage going like, well, the people who talk about global warming say that we've only got, like 10 years. Well, let's party up then. Let's drill the oil and, what do we care? Let's just party up. I'm like, well, the earth is going to be renewed like this. It isn't just going to be like a cinder that we leave and fly away to heaven. Right. And that was just amazing to me. Like, we don't go to heaven. Yeah. No, growing up, Southern Baptist, that kind of what people flat out would say those kind of things, right? Like, basically use up the earth any way you want, because who cares? Because there's going to be a new heaven and a new earth. We're going to get a new one anyway. It's like you got this car. Someone gave you a car for free and you're driving this car around and, then you start getting, you don't care. You're just kind of backing into people and running over curbs and, you're kind of trashing this car. And it's like, my dad said he's going to buy me a new one, so I don't care, right? And that's kind of our attitude about planet Earth. We just like, go ahead and use it and abuse it because we're going to get a new one any day. Right. Yeah. Amazing. Which is the opposite, right? God says in Genesis, right, we're commanded to nurture and care for and tend, not only the garden, but then the rest of the planet, right, to care for these things. And it's very different. And we've focused on
this idea of dominating. Like we want to dominate the earth. We want to dominate nature and, and the garden. But it's like anybody who's ever spent any time gardening knows that that's not, you don't go out and, I'm sorry, I'm going to go out and dominate my garden now. No, you nurture, you care for, you water, you fertilize, you dig, you break off the dead branches. Like, you are caring for and nurturing. You're not dominating your garden. If you dominate your garden, you're not going to get anything out of it.
Don't know what I'm looking for, but I'm feeling better now. Got something to avow. I'm sick of the same shit. I'm moving on now. I guess I found some kind of purpose.
Amazing. So how did people look at Revelation before these dispensational? And I know it's hard to categorize. Like,
Sure.
This is what 1,800 years of Christianity said.
Yeah.
But
well, it seems that. I mean, I did do some research for my book on that. It seems like most of the ones prior to 1830, they did understand that Revelation was about the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70. That the beast was Nero. I talk about this in the book. You have to understand the context, right, under which this guy John, which is not the same John as the disciple or apostle John. I always have to remind people of that. It's a different John. But this guy named John, who was under arrest on the island of Patmos. Understand, first of all, why he was under arrest and why was he exiled to this island? Because the Roman government saw him as a threat. They felt like he was leading almost like an insurrectionist group of these religious fanatics who they felt like were a threat to the Roman Empire, right? So he gets arrested, he gets tortured, he gets put on this island. And now he's writing letters from prison, from this island prison, to these same followers, which the Roman government is concerned about. Like, well, we don't want him stirring them up, So, number one, that's the reason why John writes in this, crazy, he's talking about 7-headed dragons and, like we just talked about, right? These weird centaur women with scorpion tails and breastplates of iron and all that stuff. That's why he's talking. He's using this highly coded language that he's pretty confident his followers are going to read it and they're going to go, oh, yeah, okay, we get it. So when he mentions the beast and he says the number of his name is 660 and 6, and then he says, let the reader understand. It's like, hey, everybody, do the math here. Think about what I'm saying. The number of his name is 660 and 6. Well, Nero's name does, because again, there's the thing in the Hebrew where the letters and the numbers, they use the alphanumeric system. So the A is 1, the B is 2, the C is 3, right? And so if you take Nero's name and convert those letters to numbers and add them up, it adds up to 660 and 6. And so they knew this is Nero, right? This is, again, the current sitting emperor over Rome, and this is who we're talking about here. So it's about the destruction of Jerusalem, and it's the hopeful promise of the day that one day Rome will be destroyed, and in the end, Christ will reign and be triumphant over the beast, over Nero. So it seems like most of them understood that. What's funny also is the reason why we also know that that is Nero is that when I think there's Latin translations of Revelation where the number is 660 and 1, or no, 600.
Or it's 616.
Yeah, 616.
Yeah.
Because in Latin, it's 616. And in Greek, it's 666.
Oh.
Yeah. So in both cases, it's Nero.
Oh, that's funny.
But that's why the number changes. So
it's not Ronald Wilson Reagan or
no.
Barack Hussein Obama.
Yeah, Barack Hussein Obama. Yeah, exactly. Now, what is interesting, like I've talked to some friends of mine about this. Like, what is interesting is, and this is why I do think I understand on some level why some Christians can see what's happening in our world today and get a little nervous, right? Like, oh my gosh, there's potential war in the Middle East. Israel is attacking Iran and Iran is attacking Israel and America's getting pulled into this. And we start jumping over to Revelation to see if we can connect some dots there, right?
Mm-hmm.
But understand, like, Revelation is written as it's a story, it's a metaphor for empire and how empires rise and fall and are ultimately destroyed from within. And so, yes, it is easy then to say, like, think about this. Think if you were a Christian in the 1940s, in maybe in Germany, and you saw Hitler, right? And Hitler's, declaring war with all these nations, and he's persecuting the Jewish people and putting them to death. And like, wow, you could probably turn to Revelation and convince yourself, wow, dude, this is it. This is the end, right? I mean, this is the tribulation's happening right there. Auschwitz, come on, are you kidding? Has there ever been a time in history where you could look at what's happening in the world, this evil, horrible thing that's happening under the tyranny of one man, right? And say, dude, Hitler is the Antichrist. Hitler's the beast. Like, come on. And on one level, you'd be wrong because, again, it wasn't the end of the world. But on another level, you kind of would be right because there are these paradigms and patterns that these kind of things can take, right? Because John is using this flowery kind of imagery, right? You can almost literally plug anything into it. Some things do kind of fit, and you can say, okay, this is a type of these things. But it's not so that doesn't tell you that, okay, so this is what's going to happen in the future. Again, it's just telling you, like, yeah, this kind of thing just keeps happening, and it's going to keep happening, right? And we need to be aware of it, but it's not, none of it is about the end of the world. None of those things are about that. Like, again, it's about the end of the age. It's about the ends of empires, and it's about the ultimate victory of Christ over those oppressive governments.
Well, isn't some of this also based in the perhaps misunderstanding or misapprehension of what prophecy is? Because I've also heard, well, prophets in the Bible, if they didn't correctly predict the future, then they were executed. So they all had to be right. So if this is a prophecy, then it has to be right. And since we haven't seen it happen yet, it has to apply to sometime in the future. Right.
Yeah, well, okay, but I think that may be a misunderstanding of what we mean by prophecy, right? Also, though, but it's also this it's a mistake to say, well, because we haven't seen this happen yet. It's like, well, actually, it has happened. It just hasn't happened literally, right? No, we haven't seen a 7-headed dragon come out of the ocean and, crush some people. Like, well, but you're probably not going to see that. You know what I mean? I'm going to just go out on a limb here and say I don't think anyone's going to turn on the TV at any point and go, oh, my God, there's a 7-headed dragon coming out of the ocean.
Right.
So, understanding first of all, what is the subject matter? What is it talking about? And then you can see how these things were fulfilled. That's why I said, like, if you could read Josephus and read his account of the destruction of Jerusalem, you could start to see some of the parallels. You say, okay, these 100-pound hailstones. Well, they had catapults, right? And they were like throwing these stones over the wall and crushing buildings and people. Okay. Yeah, that's kind of like a hailstone, right? It's not literally, but I get it. I mean, I see what you're saying here, right? You can connect some of the dots, some of the literalness of it. But the literalness is not in the language. It's in, okay, these things were fulfilled, and how were they fulfilled? I think the thing too, and this is one of the things I think is the biggest problem, not just that people get scammed and they get ripped off and or that they walk around full of fear and anxiety that they're going to miss the rapture. And I've talked to grown adults who still have terror and anxiety over this rapture fear, right?
I have it. I drove down to Times Square one day, and they were doing some kind of film shoot. And there was nobody in Times Square. And it's just like that chilling moment of,
it's happened and I missed it. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, exactly. I had someone tell me once that they came home from work. It was a guy, grown man, married with kids, came home from work. The door was open. He walked in the house. There was like food cooking on the stove. His daughter's, like, where she was sitting at the table coloring, was sitting there, and there's crayons on the floor. He walks through the house. He's calling everyone's name. There's nobody there. And he literally, like, just falls on the floor and starts sobbing because he thinks, oh, my God, the rapture's happened and I'm all alone. And then the wife comes back in the house with the daughter, and their cat had jumped the fence, and they went over to the neighbor's house to get the cat.
Yeah.
But just in that split second, it was enough for him to think, oh, my God, it actually happened, right? So, again, it does a lot of damage. This teaching has done a whole lot of, and continues to do a lot of damage to people psychologically and emotionally and things like that. But I also feel like one of the other dangers and one of the other problems with this teaching is that it essentially paralyzes Christians. It paralyzes the church, right? We take this posture of, well, Jesus is going to come back and fix it, right? Mm-hmm. There's all this injustice in the world. Well, Jesus, just come back soon. But and the more you believe that it's any day now, and the worse things get, well, that just proves to you that we're getting closer and closer, right? So things getting worse and worse and worse. And so therefore, Jesus is coming back any day now. So it just forces us to, it conditions us to sit and twiddle our thumbs and to wait, right? And to not stand up for justice, to not speak out, to not be a voice for the oppressed. Like, we're supposed to be the hands and feet of Jesus, but we end up doing nothing because we're waiting for Jesus to come back and do it. And what I see, and this is kind of the way I look at what is being said, and how I think we should understand this, again, the second coming of Jesus. I feel like the second coming of Jesus is us. It's the church, again, the body of Christ. We are the temple. We are the priesthood. We are the sacrifice. And we are the presence of Christ in the world today, right?
Right.
There's that old hymn that says, Christ has no body now but yours. And so, and I think that's consistent with what Paul says. When Paul talks about the coming, the word in the Greek is parousia. It just means presence. It's the presence of Christ. And Paul talks about the presence of Christ as being here now. It's not coming soon, right? Christ is in you. And, Christ fills all things in every way, and we are filled with the fullness of Christ. And so Christ is in the world in a way, like Jesus says, I will never leave you or forsake you. So Jesus hasn't left. Christ hasn't left. Christ is still in all of us. And so Christ is still in the world, I sometimes will ask people, like, hey, if Jesus was walking around today, right, where would you find him? Like, you needed to go find him, get in your car in your town and go, I got to go find Jesus. Where would you look? Well, people say, like, well, maybe like children's cancer wards, or maybe, he would be downtown in the bar, or he'd be, on the street corner talking to the prostitutes or something, like he'd be with those people. Like, that's where Jesus would be if I needed to find Jesus. He'd be with the outcast. He'd be with the people that are suffering, people that are sick, people that are in poverty, people that are, okay. But big shocker, guys. Christ is in the world right now. It's you. It's me, right? It's us. We are Christ in the world now. So can we see ourselves going there? Do we see ourselves doing something about those things? Because those are the things that Jesus would do. And Jesus said, you'll do greater things than me. Right? So I'm the vine, you're the branches. Without me, you can do nothing. But the thing is, you will do the things I have been doing. And that's the calling. And so I think, whereas it's really hard to compete with this, Hollywood bombastic story that's like a great, blockbuster film, this evil tyrant and wars and blood up to the bridles of the horses and dragons and, all these kind of, wow, it's like a crazy, amazing story. It's hard to beat that. It's hard to take that story.
International conspiracy. They take over the financial system.
Yes. And so it's hard to take that story away from people, like to tell them that's not real. That's not going to happen. That's not coming in the future. Right. It's like, man, then, how do you replace that story? Because it's so great. I need a story that's great to replace that. And my thing is to say, I think a better metaphor would be, it's like as if we really understand this, if we understand what Jesus is saying, what Paul is saying, in the New Testament about our role in what God is doing in the end, or just in the world today, right? I think the metaphor, it's kind of like Obi-Wan showing up in your living room and saying, here's a lightsaber. Would you like to fight the Empire and save the princess? Because you are now empowered to do that, right?
Right.
You are someone, Christ is alive in you, and part of God's plan involves you helping us to bring the kingdom of God on earth as it is in heaven. And so I think it makes each individual one of us part of that story, and we have a role to play in it, and we certainly have the power to do those things, right? And you could extend that metaphor, right? We all have the Force, and we all have, we all have this ability, and if we need a mentor, right? Well, okay, we have Christ in us to be a mentor. So I think, I think that's really the better story to tell ourselves, not to sit and wait for Jesus to come back and fix everything, because I don't think that's going to happen. It hasn't happened for 2,000 years, and I don't think that was even the promise in the first place. That's not what anyone was talking about. The plan A has always been, like Paul says in Romans, all of creation is yearning and groaning. And it's not for the second coming of Jesus. What Paul says is all creation is yearning and groaning for this one thing to happen. It's for the sons and daughters of God to be revealed. It's for us to wake up and realize, yes, it's Christ in us, the hope of glory. We are the ones that God has sent to change the world from the inside out. We're the hope of the future, right? We're the ones who are supposed to fight evil and oppose injustice and things like that in the world. I just think that's a much more compelling and more realistic, honestly, view of our current condition and things that we see happening in the world around us.
Wow, that certainly sounds more like good news than I'm going to hunker down and wait for the world to pass by and hope that I don't accidentally sin on the way.
Right. That either I don't miss the rapture, or I'm waiting for them to knock on the door and arrest me because I'm a Christian. And
oh yeah, like the jackbooted armies of the Antichrist coming door to door.
Because I refuse to take the mark. Yes.
Right. That's right. Oh man. But it feels so noble to know that you're going to do that. To be,
of course,
to rehearse that scene.
Yes. I will not bow. Yes.
Right. Well, we're actually past the hour, but I want to. We've really just kind of given an overview. I mean, we could talk about this all day. It's so deep. And I hope we can again soon.
Sure, yeah.
But I hope this is a good kind of intro or summary or reminder for the listeners. And also want to ask, you have a new book coming out. Do you want to talk about the unchristian truth? Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's already out, but it's new. And so it's called The Unchristian Truth About White Christian Nationalism. It has a wonderful foreword by Lisa Sharon Harper and several contributors, Brandon Robertson, December Rose, Matthew DeStefano, Dan Henderson, I can't remember all the names, Jamie Arpin Reese, many other people. So what we tried to do, the idea for the book was we primarily wanted to include people who are these marginalized groups of people. So people we initially went to women, people of color, people that were gay and trans, and asked them to contribute chapters about like Project 2025 and what's currently happening, taking away rights, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and these kind of things, and just write about how it's affecting them. Right. And their lived experience. And then we also included some other people that are, kind of the straight old white men like me, who are allies, right? Who understand like, hey, this is what's happening. And I want to stand with those people that are oppressed. So it's a really wonderful, it's a really great book, and it's done very well so far on Amazon, gratefully. But I think anyone right now kind of wanting to just listen to these voices, especially of these people that have the most to lose and are suffering the most. I really recommend the book. So yeah, it's called The Unchristian Truth About White Christian Nationalism. It's on Amazon now, on Kindle and paperback, probably audiobook in about a month or so. But yeah, go check that out.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll put links for that in the show notes. But Keith, thank you so much for taking the time today, and look forward to talking with you again soon. Thank you so much.
Anytime, Kelly. Thanks so much.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Faith Still Seeking. To find out more about this program, go to faithstillseeking.com. To find out more about my work, you can find me at kellywilson.com. Our theme song, Purpose, is written and performed by musician Steve RX. You can find more of his music on Spotify, Apple Music, and other streaming platforms. Thank you for listening, and God bless.
I guess I found some kind of purpose.